the minute you achieve the purpose of something, it looks great as well. You appreciate it as something that's great. You know, a horse looks great because it's designed to run very fast as an animal, right? If the horse was supposed to be a pet that sits on your sofa, it wouldn't look very great, right? It would look a bit out of proportion. We appreciate beauty in things that are designed for purpose, you know, with a real purpose in mind. And I think that's when things truly become beautiful in our heads, because we connect to them in a completely different level.
Hello and welcome to Things I've Learnt, a podcast from Mix Interiors. I'm your host, Harry McKinley, and across my professional career, I've been incredibly privileged to speak to some of the design industry's most insightful and influential figures. Now I want to share some of that insight with you. Across this first season of Things I've Learnt, I'm joined by visionary leaders from the world of design in its broadest sense. I'll be asking them to share what they've learnt about success, failure, and of course, design, to gain an understanding of their inner worlds, so we can explore how that translates to the world around us. Before we welcome our first guest, I'd like to start by sharing something valuable that I've learnt. Mark Manson's wildly popular and very sweary book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, contains a pretty radical core message. Improving our lives hinges not on our ability to turn lemons into lemonade, he says, but on learning to stomach the lemons better. It reminds me of something I once heard from a friend. She's almost 101 and she takes everything in her stride. For someone who can occasionally be a bit highly strung, I've always found that to be an enviable quality. And when I asked her how she does it, she said, "Oh, darling, when you've had the life that I've had, you learn not to sweat the small stuff." Now, when it comes to design, I'm not suggesting the small stuff doesn't matter, especially when great design is often in the details. But I've seen even the most accomplished designers come unstuck when they get bogged down in the minutiae and forget to see the bigger picture. Chasing perfection is admirable, but sometimes it's unachievable. So I've learned that sometimes good is enough. And when things get in the way, sometimes it even helps to not give up. And, well, I'll let you finish that sentence. This episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by Afroditi Krassa, founder of the eponymous Afroditi Design Studio. Afroditi, you have worked on some of the most defining hospitality projects of our times, from Dishoom to the Savoy Grill. You've collaborated with some of food and drink's biggest names, including Gordon Ramsay and Heston Blumenthal. And you've also been awarded over 40 design gongs since founding your studio more than 2 decades ago. And the Evening Standard named you one of London's most influential people. Your studio is called Afroditi. That's it. It's just your first name. And I think there's a real rock star confidence in that. You're a bit like the Madonna or the Sting of design. So tell me, have you also mastered the art of not giving an F?
I'm trying. I guess I have a long way to go until I reach the grand old age of 101. There's another 51 years to go to learn that. I guess, yes, with age you do learn not to give an F. And the thing you said about perfection, it actually really resonates with me. It's a really interesting comment you made. For anybody who knows me a bit better, they know that I'm very obsessed with Roger Federer, who was well known for being the perfect tennis player. That was his kind of signature, that he would be called Mr. Perfect. And he recently said, in an interview he did with Uniqlo, and he was talking about the things he's learned, that striving for perfection is a big mistake, because it really stops you from searching failure and being able to handle failure, which is actually a really great thing. And it's almost like a fear of failure that makes a lot of people strive for perfection. And I've met a lot of people in my life, including myself when I was younger, where we would say, "Oh, but I'm a perfectionist." And you use that almost as an excuse to cover every possible angle and every possible aspect that could fail on anything you're doing. Every possibility of failure becomes a fearful thing. So you almost like strive for this unrealistic scenario of perfection to avoid failure. And I don't know if I've mastered the art of not giving an F fully, because I'm emotional, I'm Greek, I'm passionate. So I find it quite hard sometimes to stomach the lemons and the lemonade. But I've definitely learned to accept failure and actually seek for failure. And that's something that when I started my career, I definitely would be totally fearful of. And this is something I'm also trying to instill in the team, that, the more mistakes we make, the more we learn. And you have to make mistakes because these are the best ways to learn. And that means you're experimenting creatively as well, that you're not just playing safe.
So we'll get into the meat of failure a bit later and how freeing yourself of a fear of failure has allowed you to reach for success. But before that, a word from our series partner. As a podcast listener, you understand the importance of great sound quality. So does Impact Acoustic, and that's why they've made it their business. Impact Acoustic create bespoke, design-led acoustic solutions for commercial spaces. They also know that, as a designer, you care about the planet. That's why Impact Acoustic's diverse range of products are not only beautiful and functional, they're also designed with sustainability at their core. For more information on Impact Acoustic, visit impactacoustic.com. So, first chapter then, Aphroditi, success. What does success mean to you?
I think it's a bit of a strange question because I don't consider myself successful, I'll be very honest. I always look into the future, so I always dream of what's going to happen next. And to me, the world is so immense, there's so much opportunity, so much to learn, so much to do, that I feel like you're just scraping the surface every time as a person and as a designer and as a leader of a team. I always feel this is just the beginning. When people make this type of summaries that you've just made at the beginning of, I guess all the things we've accomplished as a company, as a studio, me, myself, as an individual, I think, wow, it sounds amazing. But at the same time, I never really look back and kind of reflect. I definitely believe we've achieved an awful lot in the last 20 years of our existence as a company, and myself as a person, I've grown massively. I don't think I have a defined, that is success and that's when you reach it. I just know I want to get things done and have fun whilst I'm doing them and really create the best I can every single day. But the thing I've learned whether success or not, the one thing I've learned out of dealing with what comes with, creating something successful, let's say, rather than defining myself as successful. You mentioned Dishum, which was one of our early success projects as a studio. Suddenly you have to deal with an awful lot of what happens afterwards. I was very young when Dishum was created. It was my second project in the space of food and beverage and hospitality. I come from quite a different background. I'm a trained industrial designer, so I used to design anything from cars, planes, watches, and cameras as part of a much bigger team. I used to work in a design studio called Simo Powell. And the first project I ever did in this space was Itsu, which became a really big success and still is one of the most successful fast food brands out there in the UK and now globally. And I was very lucky to meet a really influential and visionary leader in the name of Julian Metcalf, who is the founder of Pret a Manger, and he entrusted me with creating Itsu from the beginning. And the second project straight after that was Dishum. And to be honest, I was still under 30 when Dishum was created and Itsu. I didn't expect what will come afterwards. In my head, I was still an industrial designer doing this as a sidekick. But what happens with, I guess, dealing with creating success in things that you do is things take their own course. Things are pre-decided almost for you. Suddenly I would get a lot of people interested in working with us as a team and creating similar type of projects, which wasn't my plan and wasn't my target, let's say. I think one thing I've learned is that you have to deal with what comes. I do love control. I do love kind of knowing what's going to happen next, but you have to let go of that and you have to allow things to take their natural course. And I think the other thing you have to deal with is with the expectation and the weight of that, because the minute you've created one or two successful projects, the next client comes and says, oh yeah, we want to be equally as successful as these other projects. We want to have queues constantly outside the restaurant. We want to have massive numbers and And there's this expectation that you'll be the miracle maker who will create that for them. It's not necessarily not giving an F, but it's more understanding that it's not all down to you. You cannot control everything. A lot of it depends on great teams. I mean, the client's team, it's a collaboration. And no matter what you do, you cannot control at the end. You cannot foresee what's going to happen in the future. I would love to bottle what has been successful in our successful projects and repeat it, but that's not the way it works. There's a magical kind of element that you cannot design in a space, in a project. It just happens, you know. The second thing I've learned is to deal with that kind of expectation in a slightly more relaxed way and in an understanding that you'll win some, you lose some, and that's also fine. That is life, you know, you have to accept that.
There's a lot to unpack in that, which I'm looking forward to doing. Why don't we take it from the top? You said that you don't consider yourself a successful person. That might be how you feel, but I call BS on the reality of that because you have 40 design gongs. So by any external metric, you are successful. Can you appreciate perhaps that people view you as a successful person?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to play the humble folk kind of fake humble person. I'm not going to be this like, oh yeah, that's not true. And of course I meet loads of people who look up to me and they say, oh my God, I wish one day I'll get to where you are. I guess for me, I'm a massive believer that every day you have to like strive for getting better and learning more and perfecting your game. The really great people, the greatest of people that I really admire, they never rested on their laurels. They really kept pushing and changing things and tweaking things until they got it as good as it can get. To me, that's what I mean by this is not it. I don't feel like, oh yeah, we've reached a point now where there's nothing for me to learn. There's nothing for my team to learn. And we can just repeat the same old. Because that's just, I'll be very honest, that's just simply boring. You know, life would be very boring. I think I would give up if I felt like that. To me, I look at other designers, other creators out there, and I think, oh wow, whatever that studio, they've done an interesting project there. What have they done that's interesting? What can I learn out of it? And I try to dissect what's happening out there and really learn what works and what doesn't work in the craft that we do, you know, which is design, and really analyze it. So to me, there's always a massive amount of learning to be done, B, you know, things to still achieve. As a studio, we're in a great place. We're working on some really amazing projects right now. But to me, I always look at what is the next kind of defining moment in our career as a company that, you know, that will push us to the next level. And I'll be very, very honest with you. We turned down a lot of projects, a lot more than most of our competitors. If I feel we're not really learning or pushing ourselves to the next level, I just think life is too short, you know, and I'd rather not be working on this type of projects.
Who are some of those people? You mentioned just there now that you like to learn from what other people are doing. Who has taught you about success?
Definitely the biggest influencer in my career and the person who taught me the most, not just about success, but about anything, would be Julian Metcalf. I would call Julian almost like a second father and a mentor. He entrusted me when I knew nothing to do something which was very, very fundamental for him, but also for me. It really changed the course of my life and my career. But more importantly, I spent 3 years working very, very closely with him. That guy, apart from the fact that I think he's pure genius and there's not many of them around the world, he's got real rock and roll attitude. You know, he's your very rare breed of an entrepreneur who can really break molds and really think in a completely different way. And he would always say to me, Aphroditi, you need to stick to your guns and educate others in your vision. And that stayed with me. So I would definitely say he's been the biggest influence. But to be honest, I've had the great honor of meeting really great people along the way after him as well. John Derkash, I would definitely name as one, who was the CEO of Costa Cafe when I met him. He became my mentor for several years. Again, really smart, visionary person. He took Costa from 600 stores to 3,000 in the space of 6 years. With his like real vision of where he wants to take the business and manage to kind of pull this quite corporate setup and kind of get the team to support him in this growth, which is, again, in our industry, we don't talk enough about leadership qualities, but, to me, that's a great leadership skill. Right now, we're working with a veteran of the hospitality world, Rich Melman in the US. Rich Melman founded a company in the 70s called Let Us Entertain You, apologies. And they've got 125 restaurants and bars across the US. They're the second largest hospitality group in the US. And he started from nothing, entered that industry without knowing anything. He's probably one of the most respected people in the US in the food and beverage sector. And the reason he's respected is, again, he's got a very visionary way of looking at things. And if you meet people who've worked with him, they've worked with him for over 20 years, and they're so loyal to him because he's got this. I think there's something about these great leaders that is magnetic. You just don't want to work for anybody else the minute you meet them. You just want to work with them because they inspire you and they kind of push you every day. And that's a very difficult thing, I think, to achieve. He's the kind of guy who's just has this wealth of knowledge and experience, way more than me, and he's got things to teach me, and to me that's why it's great to work with these people, because I always think you've got so much to learn.
So you're talking there about magnetic leadership, but for your studio, you are now that leader. Do you feel that some of what you're learning from these people you're trying to now impart on the team that you've been able to build, and what does that look like?
100%. To me, that's the biggest growth area for me as a person, because as a designer, you're taught how to create. You go to university, you learn the design process, then you start doing projects. We were at the beginning like literally a couple of people. Now we're a lot more than that. And my role is not so much to sweat over the minute, as you said earlier. My role is to inspire the team, the people who are working on the actual minute details, to inspire them and teach them what I've learned so that they can really be supported in their own role. And I see my role as a support role more than anything, a person who can help and teach and support this, I guess, youngest generation within the studio, but also inspire them so that when they come in the studio, it doesn't feel like another 9-to-5 job. It feels like a place where they can create and achieve and learn themselves. And to me, that's very, very important. It's probably more important than anything in terms of defining success. How good would I be as a leader of a larger team in terms of being able to support and inspire, what sometimes can be quite a stressful role. The role of design, especially in the hospitality sector, is fast-paced, is commercial. You're dealing with highly demanding entrepreneurs, extremely successful people who want everything done amazingly, really quick, and they want to be serviced all the time. So that is my challenge. And it's actually a challenge that I enjoy probably more than anything else I've done so far in my life.
Once you've gained success, does it change what you do with it? You mentioned previously this notion that actually you don't have to take on every project that comes your way. That's a place of luxury for a lot of studios. So what does gaining success allow you in terms of choice and how you approach your work?
I'll probably shock you by saying that I turned down more projects when I was unsuccessful and really struggling as a designer.
Why? What were these terrible projects?
I'm Greek. For anybody who hasn't worked out that I'm Greek with a name like Aphroditi. Basically, we are very defined as a nation, as a culture. We like to stick up, the middle finger to everything and everyone. We're the underdogs of Europe, and we always like to think, whoever is more powerful and can kind of control us, we can stick up the middle finger because we're this hot-headed kind of nation who can kind of carve our own path and our own way. And I guess part of the way we're raised is that we are very important as a nation because, we created democracy. So when I was younger, I would think in a very kind of, how can I say, I had a very bohemian lifestyle back then where, I had no no expenses, no overheads, nobody else to look after apart from myself. I had no payroll. I had no team to worry about. I had literally no rent to pay. So I had a lot of freedom to say, oh, these people don't look like fun. I'm going to be like hating working with them every day. They're just going to boss me around. And the idea of being bossed around is something that I really detest, I really hate. So I would turn down anybody who felt quite demanding and wouldn't give me the freedom to do what I wanted to do. The reason I set up my own business is because I wanted to be free to create what I wanted to create. The world we work within, the hospitality industry, it's an amazing industry. I love it to death. But it is a fairly corporate industry in the sense that you're dealing, with fairly large corporations, hotel groups, restaurant groups, chefs. So there's a natural scenario of having to conform. And I guess when I was younger, I was a bit more anarchic in that sense, and I didn't want to fit within that world. So I would have turned down a lot more projects than I'm turning down now.
So does success come from learning to be less idealistic and more pragmatic, do you think?
A lot of it is also fear. Turning down projects feels less scary than picking them up and having to deal with, can I deliver? Can I do this? I keep referring to tennis. Tennis is always my analogy. It's a bit like being asked to play in a Wimbledon final. It's a thing you dream, but you also dread, it's terrifying. So in many ways, a lot of tennis players would avoid getting there because suddenly they're faced with their own capabilities, let's say. The one thing success has taught me, experience has taught me, and I've reached now the good old age of 50, is that I can trust myself a lot more than I ever did. And I'm much more confident in my own ability and also, more importantly, in the team's ability. Not just me, because we are a team. And I know that we will, not always, but pretty much every time deliver really, really highly. So the success gives you that freedom of not being as scared every single time you go into a Wimbledon final. But the Wimbledon final is what I always wanted to play. So there you go,
Let's move into failure. How do you define failure, Afroditi?
I guess when things don't go as you wish they would go or planned in your head that they would go.
Can you remember the first time in work or life you had to confront failure and what it taught you?
In terms of career, I would probably say very early on when I was a student at the Royal College of Art, I worked under Professor Ron Arad, the architect from Israel. I joined that course as I don't remember how old I was, 25-year-old, yes, to do my master's at the Royal College. And, you walk in the Royal College and you think, that's it, I made it.
Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, don't tell me what to do. I'm this successful designer now. And, Ron being Israeli, I showed him my first project and he said, what the fuck is that? This is like shit. And I was devastated, especially after having admired him for so long. Ron Arad was, one of the most avant-garde architects, designers of the 90s, early 2000s. So he was a defining kind of hero, when I was in Greece as a very young, aspiring student wanting to enter the world of architecture and design. I remember reading about him and thinking, wow, this is amazing. What this guy does is amazing, really cutting edge. And then I joined the RCA having this vision that I would be kind of one of the select 20 students of Ron. And Ron would just tell us all how great we are. And he didn't. And it felt really devastating not to get that kind of approval. And it really makes you question yourself. You feel a bit, there is a term now, the imposter syndrome. You start thinking, am I good enough for this,
Did that teach you anything about how to approach failure within your own team? Because if that didn't make you feel great, even though you're saying it taught you something that might have been helpful, are you ever tempted to take that approach with your own team?
I would like to think that I'm fairly empathetic, especially when it comes to, look, designers, we're creative people, we're sensitive souls, If you're a good designer, you put a lot of your heart and soul and emotion onto something you create. So you expose yourself by nature, you expose your inner, who you are. And that makes you feel quite vulnerable because the minute somebody says, oh, this is not good enough, you automatically start not questioning what you've created, but questioning yourself. The thing I've learned, I didn't learn it back, by the way, I didn't learn that when I was part of the RCA. I was still too young to understand this. It took many, many failures to understand this, is that what you create, whether it's well received or not well received, does not reflect back on you. You have to disassociate the two things. Yes, it's your creation, but by someone saying this is not good enough, they're not saying you're a shit designer. And the next thing I'm going to say, it's very easy to say, but extremely hard to really accept. The minute somebody says this is not good enough, that pushes you to do a better job. And that's when you learn the most. But to be honest, until you reach a point where you feel like, yes, I belong, yes, I'm good enough, yes, I believe in myself, you never really can accept this. So you need to reach this point of being able to trust in yourself, and then you will enjoy failure.
How do you differentiate between those two things? Because on the one hand, it's you need to disassociate from certain criticism, perhaps, of the work, but at the same time, you'd mentioned that criticism can also help. So how do you know which ones to kind of brush off and what to listen to?
I think that comes with experience. It becomes very easy. I'll give you a recent example. We had quite a difficult client meeting last week. Big team, quite indecisive in between them into what they want. We presented something that, I believe was really, really strong. They were a bit, all over, arguing between them into what they want, what they don't want, and this and that and the other. It's very easy for the team who's worked on this to feel disheartened after that. And to me, I said to them, look, there is a learning curve for us here, which is how to manage this client. But other than that, there's not much to learn into, what we designed, because to be honest, I would have, if I was to present it again next week, I would have presented the exact same thing. The fact that the client hasn't got a strong vision and they're unsure between them as to what they're after, and they're not clear and they have internal conflict, it doesn't reflect on us. But then we've got clients equally who, we're working currently with a Corinthia here in London. And here we've got somebody who is asking us to improve every time we present something. And to me, that's great. I don't put that in the bracket of failure, but it's on the bracket of pushing you to go to the next level. And that to me is a great client to have. So you need to learn to differentiate between the two. But I think that comes with experience. It's a very simple thing. It's the more you do things, the more you learn, and the more you're able to handle these situations. I'm very confident that I've reached a point where I can easily separate the two and be able to very clearly see where there's an opportunity to grow and where there's just noise that you just need to ignore and push forward.
How does that impact on the way that you lead your own team? Even if there are occasionally times where you're feeling affected by criticism or something that could be seen as a failure, presumably you need to be able to project a degree of positivity onto the people you're working with. Is there also a bit of disassociation there? In other words, there's what I think about this and there's what I'm going to present to the team so that they don't get disheartened and they can view this criticism in a positive light.
I'm not a believer in that. I'll be very honest. I feel that the more open and transparent you are as a leader as to what's happening within a business, whether the good, the bad, and the ugly, the more a team will be onboarded and part of the journey. If a football team goes to the pitch and loses, they all know they've lost. There's no sugarcoating in that. I try to be as transparent as to what's happening. But before I do that, I always try to process things internally myself, take a bit of time between what has happened and before I communicate that to the team. So it doesn't become a knee-jerk reaction. It becomes something that's a bit more mature. And I always believe that it's best to explain, what you're going through as a leader, because it's very important for team members to also see you as a real leader who is not always picture perfect smiling and giving the good news, but it's also, a human being who might be also affected as a leader on an emotional level. And there's nothing wrong with that, showing vulnerability, emotion, and being transparent with your feelings in a team as a leader, I think only allows everybody else to be equally relaxed about having moments where they're not feeling well. If I constantly go to the team, I'll give you an example and say, oh yeah, this has not gone great, but hey, it's great. Let's all be positive. Then it puts this weight on somebody to always pretend that they're also positive as well. It's almost like you're not acknowledging the fact that, yes, there will be negative times, there will be negative days, but we're all a team. We all need to support and help each other in going through that. So I need the support of my team as much as my team needs my support in going through these difficult patches, the turbulent kind of phases of the studio. So yes, no, I don't try to always be, especially a fake positive. I'm not a believer in that.
Mix Interiors is the leading platform for commercial interior design and architecture, in print and online. We feature the people shaping and reshaping the world around us. Explore the latest projects setting the bar for exceptional design and showcase the products at the very forefront of innovation and creativity. For more information on how to subscribe in print or to view the latest digital content, head to mixinteriors.com. So, design then, Afroditi. It was a couple of years ago, but we once had a conversation about taste. Good taste, bad taste, and why it's not the same thing as good and bad design. So I wanted to ask you about that and if taste factors into your work. Do you care if everyone likes it?
I hate it when people come and say, oh, we love your taste. I think it's this kind of bourgeois way of looking into design, especially interior design, where people think it's all about taste, it's choosing the right, colors that all match together. I don't believe in taste. We discussed this before. What I mean by that, good design is objective, is not subjective. I hate it when people, hate maybe is a big word, but when you're faced with good design, it's good design. It works. When I say it works, I don't mean it works on a functional level. Like I'm sat on a chair which is well designed and it's comfortable. It works on so many different levels. It works on an emotional level. People connect to great design. People recognize innovation as well. They know when something is different and great. Whether you're knowledgeable about design or not, whether you've studied design, whether you follow design, when something is really, when it's got conviction, when it's got integrity, you sense that, you feel that, you know that. It's the same with any creative sector. To be honest, with even what we don't traditionally consider creative business, let's say, when to trust the business or not. You can feel when a business has got integrity. When you go sometimes to a great hotel or on paper great and you think, something is quite wrong, but I can't really put my finger on it. You can sense that something is a bit fake or not really, it lacks integrity. That's the only way I can describe it, So to me, good design speaks for itself. And do I care about creating tasteful things? Not necessarily, I'll be honest with you, but I do massively care about creating pieces of good design that have got real integrity and real conviction and also become commercially successful. And not in a lot of designers like to talk about the dirty money word. I've been in loads of meetings, talks and such, like where people see designers as the people who spend money without caring about making money for a business. And to me, that's because as an industry, we're not very vocal about the success we bring to our sector and how integral good design is to success. The efficacy, I guess, the efficiency of design in creating success in a business. And that I'm also very passionate about. No matter how many awards we collect and gongs and accolades, the real judge is the commercial aspect of anything you have designed. What I mean by that is the longevity. If I look, for example, at my first ever creation, Itsu, I created the logotype of Itsu back in 2003. It's now 2024, soon to be 2025. That logotype hasn't changed for over 22 years. Anybody can say it's good taste, bad taste. I'm not really interested. What I'm interested is that it obviously has served its purpose in what it had to achieve as a design. and it's still around 22 years later, which in today's world is an awful long time. So to me, good design, it's evident in the way that consumers, the real audience out there, responds to it. We can, as an industry, sit all in nice fluffy chairs and say, oh yeah, I can give an award to this place, a great design. In the end of the day, the only judge to me is the guest that walks in. To me, that's the real proof of success.
It really speaks to something else that you've once told me, which is that designers aren't artists because they have a job to do.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me because I thought it got to the heart of the fact that great design, objectively, as you said, is about that combination of form and function and perhaps even commercial success. So what have you learned about creating spaces that work as well as looking beautiful?
We always separate form and function, but to me, the form and function, they're not separate things, you know, and I love it when somebody says, oh, this looks great, but doesn't work, you know. Well, if it doesn't work, it's not a great design. And looking great, I think who was it? I think it was Ferrari who said that. He said, my cars look great because they're very fast. By that, what he meant is that the minute you achieve the purpose of something, it looks great as well. You appreciate it as something that's great. You know, a horse looks great because it's designed to run very fast as an animal, right? If the horse was supposed to be a pet that sits on your sofa, it wouldn't look very great, right? It would look a bit out of proportion. We appreciate beauty in things that are designed for purpose, you know, with a real purpose in mind. And I think that's when things truly become beautiful in our heads because we connect to them in a completely different level. How does this apply in the world that we do? You know, we design restaurants, bars, hotels, cinemas. And to me, one very important aspect of everything we do is longevity. As I'm growing older, that becomes more and more relevant in the work that we create. And to me, great design should go through the test of time. Hospitality has become very lifestyle-led as a sector in the last 10 years, I would say. It's changed an awful lot since I first started, and it's changed very radically. I guess with the whole social media growth, you know, younger people not going to music venues, not following rock stars, they'll follow chefs, and they want to be seen in the latest and best of restaurants and everything else. It has become much more of a lifestyle area. Good design, going back to answering your question, the form and function, not only in the industry we're in, not only has to serve guests that are coming in, but also has to serve the team that operates these spaces. And we tend to forget that conundrum of combining the needs of several people here. You know, you talked about the Savoy Grill, which is a great example. The Savoy Grill is an extremely compact environment. You know, it's really small as a restaurant. It's historic. It's very sought after, and it has to provide this exceptional service at all times. So this is a really difficult space to design, and I'll explain why. You need to understand how all the team that operates this space, the Metro D and everybody else, will magically move around the space looking completely effortless whilst they're doing a very difficult job of navigating a very compact space. You also need to understand the mentality of the guest who's coming there for a very special occasion, perhaps once in a lifetime type of occasion, and they need to enter this space and feel enveloped in this most beautiful, magical of dining rooms. And at the same time, you've got the business side of things, which is we need to make X amount of covers every week in order to hit our numbers. So therefore, even down to simple things, we need to have as many seats. We need to have as much flexibility. We need this and that and the other. So you need to kind of combine all these things in a very harmonious, beautiful way, and at the same time think this has to last at least 12 years. The last time the Savoy Grill was touched was more than 12 years ago, and I'm certainly not interested in creating a design that will need to be refurbished in 5 years. I'm certainly interested in creating something that, you know, if you count 12 years from now, that's what, 2037, still needs to look amazing then, if not longer, for me to consider that as a success project. So it's quite a complex area, and I think that's why it's so challenging as an area of design.
But you've created some of the most revolutionary hospitality spaces and concepts. So even though there seems to be this kind of secret sauce of what great design is, what have you learned about originality, about creating spaces and concepts that actually break the mold in some way?
Well, the one thing I've learned, and I guess going back to what we discussed earlier, being Greek, is that you have to stick to your own belief and conviction and not follow whatever everybody else is saying. And to me, started really from being this, slightly subversive kind of person who challenge everything. And this is a good thing. This is a great thing, because the minute you challenge and you don't follow, you go to a place where you create something that's singular in vision. And that's why I respond sometimes very negatively, I guess, to the word trend. To me, trend sounds more like you're following what everybody else is doing rather than carving your own path. I'll give you a very good recent example to put what I'm explaining in simple terms. I was approached very recently by a well-known chef, I won't name, to design a new fish and chips concept, right? Fish and chips is, I guess, one of the most stereotypical of categories. Close your eyes, fish and chips, what do you see? What do you smell? What do you feel? And if you ask 100 people, 99 would give you the exact same answer, right? It's always the same colors, white and blue. There will be fish somewhere as a logo. There will be a specific smell in the space. You imagine specific tiles. It's kind of like super stereotypical. Even in terms of the offer, how it's presented, you need to always ask, what is it that's unique to you? What is it that you own? What is it that's proprietary to you? You're a chef, and you might put your name onto this. Take away that. What is it that makes you different to everybody else? That is the fundamental question that you would ask any product designer when they start a project. And this is my training. And in the world of products, because you enter a very saturated marketplace, you have a very clear definition on what defines your product versus your competitors. In the world of food and beverage, this idea doesn't even exist a lot of the times. So people would say, oh, I want to do fish and chips. Okay, great. What's different about your fish and chips? And they look at you and they're like, oh, it's just going to be really good fish and chips. Yeah, how do you define that? I don't know. It's just going to be really fresh. Well, that's kind of a given. You can't have fish that's off, right? And the fact that you're a chef, again, doesn't mean anything, because there's loads of chefs who've done fish and chips. How does this differentiate you from everybody else? To me, you need to start from that heart, in every project. What is it that is different? And if there isn't, we need to go back to finding a point of difference. And it might not be the product. People automatically think, oh, I need to change the product. I need to do something crazy with my fish and chips. No, you don't. It might be the way you serve it. It might be the style of operation. It might be the design and the experience. It might be that you play completely different music, that nobody else is playing in fish and chips. And sometimes you have clients who are really not interested in this, and they think that playing safe would be less risky. And what I've learned is that playing safe is the biggest risk you can take, because that's when game's over. The minute you go in a marketplace with no point of difference, in today's world, you cannot open in any location without having a clear message as to what's different to you versus your competitors. Sometimes we create that innovation, but sometimes it's given. So I'm not always going to take credit for everything. There's always teamwork. And going back to success and failure, we always say success has many parents and failure is an orphan. But every project, successful or not, there's always this teamwork.
So I feel like we've just gone full circle, Afroditi. You've talked about success, failure, and design. All of the things that we've covered across this conversation. But if you could encapsulate all of that in just one lesson, what would that lesson be?
Have fun. I keep going back to having fun. To me, if you learn to handle success and failure in the most kind of fun way you can have in both situations, then everything becomes so much easier. Fun sounds very lighthearted and not very serious, but actually it's a great guide to making decisions in life, in my opinion. And I didn't value that when I was younger. But I've reached a point where I think you really need to believe that you're going to have fun in a project. You're going to have fun with the people you're working with. Life is simply too short to not have fun. and this is something that I wish if I was younger I understood, that fun is really an important aspect, and it's not this kind of frivolous, kind of superficial thing. The minute you have fun in things, you're so much better at things.
It's been a really interesting conversation, Aphrodite, as I knew it would be. And you've taught me a couple of things. Firstly, maybe sometimes in life we should all be a bit more Greek. And secondly, I love this point that we have to disentangle criticism of our work and what we do from criticism of us and who we are. I think that's a really valuable lesson. So thank you.
My pleasure. What a fun conversation.
Thank you for listening to Things I've Learned. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast and recommend us to your friends. Join us again next time when I'll be speaking with Google DeepMind's Ali Islami. We also film these conversations, so if you want to see us as well as hear us, head over to our website, mixinteriors.com. Things I've Learned is hosted by me, Harry McKinley. This episode was produced by Nada Smiljanic, and the executive producer was Dan Jackson, with original music by Memotone. Things I've Learned is a co-production by We're Just Listening and Mix Interiors.